One day, I had a man claim my Skyrim builds weren't the best on YouTube. Unfortunately, I am the High King of Skyrim. Welcome one and all to my latest legendary difficulty Skyrim build, the High King. After having completed my series of challenge builds, I decided to work on a couple of insanely powerful builds that you can dominate with. This build combines a powerful and versatile warrior with a deep backstory to create a character who truly belongs in Skyrim. Don't forget to give the video a like and subscribe to the channel so that you can watch all of my various builds whenever you want. In addition, if you enjoy my other content, consider hitting the notification bell so you can be the very first person to watch my videos once they're out. Without any further delay, let's get on to the backstory. He remembered his mother's dying words, telling him about his father, revealing his lineage, and granting him greater purpose to his life. He was the son of High King Islod, and bastard or not, his place was in Skyrim. He had grown up in the Imperial City, and was used to the streets and taverns of his home, having been raised by his barmaid mother before the sickness took her. He was now a young man, and needed a way to finance his planned journey. At first he took up the place of his mother, working in the bar and picking up what few tips he could. It wasn't long before he was replaced though, the customers preferring for a pretty woman to bring them their drinks. He ended up drifting between whatever work he could find, be it chopping firewood or digging in the mines. He did whatever he could in order to earn enough to leave the land in which he was raised. It took him years to save up enough for a horse, but once he had enough gold, he was able to ride away, never to see his birthplace again. It was weeks of travelling, but he was eventually only a few miles away from the border of Skyrim. He smiled for the first time in years, eager to visit his ancestral home. But as he was lost in thought, an arrow flew towards him and found its way into the side of his mount. The animal barely had time to react to the pain it felt before a dozen more arrows skewered it, felling the horse and sending its rider tumbling to the ground. There was barely enough time to gather his senses before a blade was at his throat and a bandit was snarling at him with yellow teeth. There were only a couple of coins on his person, and the bandits greedily clawed them up before searching for his pack for any valuables. Only containing a small amount of food and water, the bandits were disappointed at their haul, and their leader came up with a way to make the ambush more worthwhile. The bandit chief was a tall and slim man with scarred skin, covered by an incomplete suit of plate mail. He put a sword to his prisoner's chest and gently pushed forward as he told him that he had two choices: become a slave or die. The High King spent close to a decade serving the bandits, cleaning their clothes, cooking their food, and keeping their weapons sharp. His days were long and harsh, the beatings were regular, and he was barely given enough food to survive. No doubt a lesser man would have died in service to these heathens, but he was the son of a High King, and wouldn't allow himself to die until he had found his way to his father. This determination and stubbornness to survive led to him taking action one night. He had been left to clean and fix the chief's gear, and all but one of the group were now asleep. The bandit keeping watch told him to keep an eye on the camp while they took a leak, and he agreed. Instead of watching the camp though, he picked up the chief's sword and silently stalked the lone bandit, waiting until they were most vulnerable before charging forwards and plunging the blade between the bandits' ribs, killing them before they were able to call out. He withdrew the sword from the body and gathered up the chief's armour and a handful of supplies. He wanted to stay relatively light on his feet, but also couldn't afford to starve to death. He walked for 2 days straight before collapsing from exhaustion. He had no idea how long he slept for, but once he awoke, it was to the sound of men talking in the near distance. He crawled his way towards them. He may have been desperate for company, but he couldn't risk running into the bandits in his weak state. Fortunately, the men appeared to not be bandits, but soldiers of some kind. He didn't recognise the uniform, but decided the best course of action was to reveal himself to the group in as friendly a manner as he could muster, in the hope they will return the hospitality. He called forth to them and waved, slowly walking closer as he did. Before he had a proper chance to introduce himself though, Imperial soldiers appeared, seemingly from thin air, charging at the soldiers and cutting nearly half of their number down in a matter of seconds. His confusion at the situation only lasted a heartbeat before a soldier struck him on the back of his head, knocking him out. When he awoke, it was on a cart, heading into Skyrim itself. He had finally made it, but things were not at all as he had hoped. The main skills for this build are Enchanting, Smithing, and Heavy Armour. I'm sure at this point that everyone knows just how powerful the crafting skills are in Skyrim. I decided to skip over Alchemy and just focus on the other two, as I didn't want this build to rely entirely on just grinding these skills endlessly, but I still wanted it to be an incredibly powerful build. Enchanting won't help us with our weapons, but does help make our armour far superior by making it magical. With this character I had Enchanting raised up to 100, which meant I was able to max out Enchanter and get the extra effect perk, allowing me to put 2 enchantments on every item. This made it far easier to use enchantments to both improve offensive and defensive traits, making the character stronger in a variety of situations. In addition, you can make a smithing suit with the enchanting skill, essentially just a ring, necklace, clothes and gloves, all with the Fortify Smithing enchantment, to improve how much you can improve weapons and armour. Although I didn't have the smithing skill as high as Enchanting, I was still able to get the relevant perks, namely Arcane Blacksmith and Advanced Armours. This will allow us to make our weapons and armour legendary, improving them to their highest potential. With a high heavy armour skill and perks invested into both Juggernaut and Well Fitted, we also should be able to reach the armour cap with relative ease. You may potentially want to take the conditioning perk too in order to make yourself lighter and improve mobility, however this isn't a necessity. The additional skills of this build are Block, One-Handed, Archery and Speech. We are a sword and shield character, which means we will be using both Block and One-Handed extensively. However, neither need too much in the way of investment. In One-Handed, I only put points into Armsman for additional damage, as the extra critical damage from Bladesman isn't anything to write home about. With Block, you'll likely only want to invest 1 or 2 ranks into Shield Wall, but I highly recommend getting both the Quick Reflexes and Deflect Arrow perks. These 2 perks essentially work as anti-warrior and anti-archer perks respectively, helping us to stay alive against conventional fighters. Elemental Protection is also a worthwhile perk to take, as it reduces elemental damage by 50% when blocking, making your shield far more effective against dragons and mages. Although not primarily an archer, we still don't want to neglect this skill, as our bow will want to deal as much damage as possible. Be it peppering a foe from horseback or using a shot to start off an engagement, we want every arrow to count, so go all out in the Overdraw perk. If you find yourself using your bow regularly, then I'd also recommend investing in the Hunter's Discipline perk, to double the amount of arrows you recover from bodies. Our main arrow choice is a very rare one, so each holds great value to us, and shouldn't be left lying in the body of a bandit. The final skill of this build is Speech, and this one is here more for roleplaying. The High King speaks with great authority, and people often find themselves obeying his orders without question, despite not knowing why. You shouldn't prioritise putting perks into this skill, but I ended up with 5 spare perk points when I was done making this build, so there is certainly no harm in dropping the occasional perk in this tree. Whenever you level up with this build, you will want to put almost all of your points into health. A small amount of stamina can be helpful, but it's far more vital for us to be able to withstand as many attacks as humanly possible. As a standing stone for this build, I recommend either the Lord or Lady Stone. Not only do these fit with the build on an eponymous level, but the extra survivability they provide is incredibly helpful. The Lord Stone will almost certainly be the more useful early on, but once you can hit the armor cap without it, you may instead want the extra health and stamina regen instead of magic resistance. As powers for this build, you will want to use a variety of shouts to complement your martial skills. Dragon Rend obviously is perfect for grounding a dragon and letting you fight toe to toe with it, but some personal favourites of mine are also Marked for Death and Whirlwind Sprint. I know you will all have your own favourites though, so let me know which shouts you plan on using with the character. As a small side note, I also encourage you to complete the Book of Love quest when playing this build, in order to give yourself a permanent base magic resistance of 15%. The weapons for this build are Dawnbreaker and Oriel's Bow. Dawnbreaker is one of the more powerful Daedric artifacts in the game, being a sword of holy flame, but is especially strong against the undead. It still works perfectly well against the living though, not only dealing additional damage, but also causing weak enemies to flee from you more often than normal, helping to rapidly thin out large groups of enemies. Oriel's Bow also excels at slaughtering the legions of the dead. Its acquisition is harder than that of Dawnbreaker however, as you will need to complete the Dawnguard DLC in order to obtain it. Once you have it though, you will also gain the ability to obtain sun-hallowed elven arrows, the perfect complement to this bow. Firing one of these at the sun will cause holy light to rain down from the sky, creating random sun damage to strike out against enemies. Although this is only situationally useful, you can still shoot these arrows normally, and have a small sun damage explosion at the point of impact, making them require less accuracy than a normal shot would, and dealing significantly increased damage to enemies such as skeletons and vampires. The armour for this build is a full set of steel plate armour minus the helmet, which will instead be replaced by the jagged crown. This creates quite the striking aesthetic, and lets all that behold you know from a single look that you are a powerful warrior king who will protect his people. Steel plate armour is very easy to obtain, but the jagged crown will require you going partway through the Civil War questline and then abandoning it once you have a crown in your possession. Alternatively, you can reverse pickpocket it onto Ralof or Hadvar at just the right time, but this method will be much harder to accomplish. In addition to this, you also wield Oriel's Shield. Not only is this a beautiful item which fits in perfectly with the aesthetic, but it's also an insanely powerful shield. At first I viewed the effect of it to be more gimmicky than anything, but after playing around with it for a while, I truly see its value now. Every hit that it takes gives it a charge, and once fully charged it will glow brightly, and then you gain the ability to do a power bash with it that will create a similar effect to the Fusro Darshout, sending enemies flying, or just staggering them at a lower charge. This is an amazing ability to level the playing field when you're stuck on the defensive. Let your opponent charge up your shield and then send them flying with this power. And just like the beloved Shout, this shield can also send enemies flying off of cliffs, granting you an easy victory. In addition to your combat suit, you will also want more casual clothing for when you are walking around town and speaking to your future subjects. This set will consist of fine boots, vampire gloves, and emperor's robes. You will be looking out for the black boot variant of the fine boots, vampire gloves can be obtained during Dawnguard side missions, and the emperor's robes will become available during the Dark Brotherhood storyline. The earliest you can obtain one of these is from the double of the emperor, so you may well wish to get them at this point. Although the Dark Brotherhood may seem out of character for this build, I will explain shortly the justification I came up with for this. In terms of jewellery for this character, I highly recommend gold diamond variants. Not only do these help to display your self-perceived high ranking, but also fit in nicely with the colour scheme of the build too. There are several factions that this character will want to join. First of all, there is the Dawnguard. This faction is essential to join, in order for us to get a large amount of our equipment, but also will hold appeal to the High King, as he wishes to defend the land he considers his own. If vampires threaten Skyrim, he will gladly take the fight to them, and do whatever it takes to eradicate them from his kingdom. You will also need to join the Dark Brotherhood, in order to get the Emperor's robes. The High King is by no means suited to the life of an assassin, but once he learns of a civil war, he realises he needs his own forces to defend him, and remove potential challenges to the throne once he is sat upon it. Treat the Dark Brotherhood as your own personal assassin organisation that you're trying to restore to power in order for you to have a powerful ally in them in the future. Speaking of the Civil War, you will need to get involved with this, but only long enough to get the Jagged Crown. The High King views both sides as unworthy to rule over Skyrim. Ulfric has thrown the land into turmoil, and caused needless death of his subjects, and the Empire has treated the people of Skyrim poorly, refusing to allow them to worship freely, and live the lives they deserve. Instead, help them only long enough to learn all you need about both sides before working on your own path to obtaining the throne for yourself. As a follower for this build, I used Lydia. She suits the build well, serving the man who is both her Thane and King faithfully, defending him with her life, and proving herself to be a true daughter of Skyrim, willing to do whatever it takes to restore the noble land to its former glory. Keep in mind that as you have both enchanting and smithing, you can improve and enchant your companion's gear, so make sure to do this. This character is quite a powerful one. It's a strong tank build, able to sustain a lot of damage before going down, thanks to the sword and shield combo mixed with a high armor rating. In addition, it's also just as strong when mounted on horseback, Oriel's bow being a great bow for mounted combat thanks to the splash damage effect I mentioned earlier. More than anything, this build is versatile. You are a skilled warrior, and shouldn't struggle too much with anything. Dragons and mages present your biggest challenge, but even these aren't going to cause you a real headache, just a mild challenge on occasion. In terms of roleplaying, your sole focus should be on obtaining the position of High King of Skyrim. Obviously this isn't actually possible in the game without mods, but you can do a fair bit with roleplaying in order to make it feel like you're carving a path towards kingdom. Becoming Thane of the various holds, defending the lands, and simply learning all you can about Skyrim itself will go a long way to making you a worthy successor to the throne. I sincerely hope that all of you have enjoyed this build. If you did, make sure to let me know with both a like and a comment. In addition, if you aren't already, then subscribe to the channel. We've been steadily growing for a while, but there's still a long way to go, and each and every one of you helps the channel to grow. I hope that you all have a great day, and enjoy your time ruling over the land of Skyrim.